I don't think he would be a class traitor. I think he'd stick with the bourgeoisie. Like, I think he's Sir Topham Hatt. He's a member of the elite. Like, I don't think he'd join a picket. I don't think he'd support the workers.
You never know. when things come down to it, come the revolution, we'll see what side he's on.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, like, Che Guevara was, like, solidly, like, upper middle class for, like, where he was born, and, like, Lenin was upper middle class, I think. Like, you know, maybe Sir Topham Hatt is the Vladimir Lenin of Thomas the Tank Engine.
They're both bald, so they got that going for them.
They're both bald and love waistcoats. It's the two things.
They both got those hats.
They both got drip. Like, that's what we're saying.
Both got drip. God's sake. Okay, fuck it. Shall we start this? Hello and welcome to Unions in the UK, a podcast about unions in the UK. My name is Henry, pronouns they, them, and I'm here with Corey.
Hi, I'm Corey, my pronouns are she, her.
Nice. Something happened this week. I've noticed there's a few, like, a lot going on in the news, but I can't quite figure out if anything's happened.
I mean, I think there was like one big thing that's eaten all of the other news.
One piece of dominant news. Why doesn't the big news simply eat all the smaller newses?
Well, good news, it has.
Good. Oh, wow.
It did exactly that. We haven't heard anything in the UK except for things about the Queen's death and subsequent funeral.
Our Madge.
Yeah. Yeah, our Madge.
Sorry. Wow. Geez, that's a whole thing. What are we doing the episode about, interestingly enough?
So we're going to talk about how the death of the Queen impacted on all the trade union activity in the UK and what that means. Like, why did that happen? Why are we like this?
It's pretty weird, right? So, I mean, like, for those of you who are not from the UK...
shout out to our one listener in Austria.
One listener in Austria, one in Spain, two in Australia. And also, I mean, good for you, honestly. The UK is quite interesting when it comes to the Queen. She is a... and, like, you'll see this in the news quite a bit. She's a symbol of the British Empire, you know, a symbol, and that means that she has no power, right? I
have heard that about the Queen, yeah.
You have heard that about the Queen, she has no power. And so, it's interesting, when you do suggest she does have power, like, what happens?
The worst people alive get very angry at you.
I see. How many of these are we talking about?
A lot.
Okay.
Or, maybe just a few, but being very loud. It's really difficult to tell.
Yeah. But I guess that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
The UK is very interesting in that the Queen is all of us. We are the Queen and she is us. And so when she died, a part of us died too. I think that actually quite accurately captures a lot of the feelings towards her, honestly.
Yeah, there's other podcasts that'll talk more in depth about what the Queen means as a symbol, why her death has broken a lot of brains in the UK, what that says about them. But we're not here to talk about that. We simply don't care.
No.
We're here to
official stance of the podcast. Yeah. Don't give a shit.
Yeah, like we're here to talk about why the day she died, multiple unions that were gaining a lot of momentum in their industrial action cancelled their strikes, notably the CWU and I believe the RMT. Have we actually checked that, or am I just slandering the trade people?
No, I'm pretty sure the RMT did push theirs back. I think they moved theirs. If they
CWU
didn't,
have still they have moved them.
yeah, they cancelled theirs on the 8th and 9th of September. Because I mean, the 8th was when Armaj died. And then the 9th was, the day that everyone outside was wearing black. And I always wear black all the time. And so when I went around Asda and people were nodding at me, I thought something was on my face. And then I realized it was because we all have a horrible, horrible sickness. But that sickness is actually interesting because that kind of has a bit of an impact on what am I trying to say here, Corey?
Well, I mean, I think it's sort of a display of how the state overrules everything else. When something truly important happens to the state, it overrules everything, including what should be a trade union's prime directive, which is to continue with industrial action until you've won.
And that feels like a bit of a problem, right?
Yeah, it does. It's not like the Queen's death isn't the only time this kind of thing happens. Obviously, there's the whole month that everyone in the country has to wear a poppy, no matter what you believe about the institution that's raising money for, about the symbolism that represents, whatever, no matter what you believe. If you're not wearing a poppy, you are basically hounded out of public life if you have a high profile, to the point where at one point, when David Cameron was Prime Minister, he actually went to China on a state visit wearing his poppy and upset the Chinese government because over there the poppy isn't a symbol of remembrance of people who died in wars. Well, I mean, I suppose it is actually just a war that we inflicted on them as we wanted them to buy all of our heroin.
I'm just imagining. I mean, who was chairman of China at that point?
It was Xi, wasn't it?
Was it Xi? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
Xi's
just
been in charge
imagining
for
she
a
stood
while.
there, like shaking hands with David Cameron and like gripping maybe just a bit too tight.
Yeah, just absolutely furious at the man who allegedly fucked a pig.
I mean, maybe that's softened the blow a bit for him. I mean, this was before that whole news came out. Wild. Oh, what that was.
Yeah, the UK is
7 years ago.
Yeah, the UK is a weird labyrinthine mess of strange politics that don't make any sense. For people who have no idea what I'm referring to when I'm talking about a man who allegedly fucked a pig, look up David Cameron Piggate, and I'm not going to ruin the surprise for you. Like, because it's worse than what I said somehow.
Yeah. No, he didn't fuck a pig. He just put his willy inside the pig's mouth. Simple.
Yeah, and it gets worse. Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, so these weird displays of like state power that have to be enforced across everyone impact trade unions as well. And the reason that it impacts them is things like the mainstream media, like newspapers, television news, all of that will viciously attack absolutely anyone who doesn't perfectly toe the line at that moment.
I mean, like, I'm running the risk of my personal like feeling towards running this podcast was I was going to do everything in my power not to mention Jeremy Corbyn as much as I could. But I mean, he's a prime example of what happens. So like there was a time when they were doing a memorial service and he didn't bow enough He didn't bow to the perfect angle for enough, at least enough for the newspapers, and they hounded him for doing it was a subtle jab at the monarchy and those who had fallen, even though this dude was he was showing like fucking display of obedience to the state, and that wasn't enough, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's truly bizarre, this country.
Yeah. I mean, actually, that's sort of the thing is like, even if you do the appropriate like rituals and deference and everything, there's a chance that the mainstream media especially will run against you, and that this has been happening basically forever. I've actually got a reasonably long Gramsci quote from Newspapers and the Workers from 1916, where Gramsci specifically talks about this, where he says, the bourgeois newspapers tell even the simplest of facts in a way that favours the bourgeois class and damns the working class in its politics. Has a strike broken out, the workers are always wrong as far as the bourgeois newspapers are concerned. Is there a demonstration? The demonstrators are always wrong solely because they are workers, and they are always hotheads, rioters, hoodlums. The government passes a law, it's always good, useful and just, even if it's not. And if there's an electoral, political or administrative struggle, the best programmes and candidates are always those of the bourgeois parties. So this has been happening forever, since there has been a working class representative on like any sort of national level or international level. This has been going on, and Gramsci specifically talks about like strikes there and things that will still be relevant to trade unions specifically. And
just a bit of background on Gramsci, just in case people aren't sure.
Oh yeah, sure,
who he is. I mean, like, what was happening in Italy around that time?
So Gramsci was born. I'm not going to do a whole bit now. Gramsci was an Italian Marxist at the time that fascism was on the rise. He was put in prison by a fascist judge who specifically said, we need this man's brain to stop working. Because
I feel that about myself as well sometimes.
Yeah, but when I say it about me, that just means that I would like to sleep for once. When a judge says it about Gramsci, it means he had some very good and interesting ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he was a Marxist theorist, in sort of incredibly influential. And we're going to talk about actually like one of like his most influential theories in just a moment, because the reason that unions do struggle with the media and do sort of have to capitulate to these rituals, even when it goes against what should be their prime directive, again as trade unions is struggling for the working class, it's because the working class do not have cultural hegemony. They don't have cultural hegemony, which is a theory that basically says the people in charge of the culture get to deem what is and is not acceptable. So, like, you look at what drug laws are in place. Like, even if a drug is ultimately harmless, or a drug would be good to prescribe to people for certain things, the reason it isn't is because of cultural hegemony. The people in charge have decided that they don't want that to be available, and the people are not powerful enough in the culture to decide that it's something that should change.
I think. Sorry, I was I was reading the Gramsci quote again. I think that's a pretty good definition. I was seconds away from saying what is cultural hegemony, apart from a word that I will never be able to spell, along with bourgeoisie and bourgeois. But so that is interesting as well, considering, like, I mean, what we talked about last week, trade unions, at least a lot of them, are like pretty much. Some of them are part of the functioning of the state.
Yeah.
Why don't they have that um that hegemony, or any sort of like piece of the pie of that hegemony sort of thing?
So I mean, in the UK specifically, I think it's because, like we talked about last time. I think it was last time where I talked about like Rosa Luxemburg saying that like the trade unions in the UK are so old and established that they're basically already part of the state, which means they're subject to the cultural hegemony because they're not part of a counterculture that's trying to develop a different one. So they don't have the power to develop a different cultural hegemony, and it's sort of hard to imagine them having that power unless they're willing to defy what is the current cultural hegemony, and they currently don't feel like they're in a position to challenge that. And like,
especially like thinking from their perspective in such a critical time like hot strike summer and moving into hot strike autumn, they have a lot of this motivation,
yeah,
and they don't want to spend that solidarity sort of thing.
Yeah, like it's sort of like in the 80s during the miners' strike, there was a saying about like Arthur Scargill where if he didn't exist, someone would have had to invent him, kind of thing, because the media at that point wanted to destroy the unions, and the mainstream media is looking for an excuse to beat down the strikes. It's one of the reasons we ended up talking about Eddie Dempsey last time, because he was being used as a wedge issue by the right-wing media to attack the strikes. And like, he is a liability and a danger, and by a number of accounts a racist.
Colossal piece of shit.
Yeah. Like, all of these things are true, but the media is still using him, was still using him as a tool, because they have that power. And trade unions do not have any sort of actual media presence. There's no left-wing paper in the UK, no mainstream left-wing paper that's solely dedicated to the union perspective. Like, we've got The Guardian, but they are, at best, like a...
They're bougie as fuck.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
They're like, me dad's flower shop, me dad's working class flower shop business, and...
Yeah,
and I don't know how best to describe them, but they're definitely
they're sort of like almost like petty bourgeois levels of person, where it's like you don't understand that by throwing in your lot with the people you're throwing in with, when you do, you're causing yourself problems, but okay.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like, so it's not the best example. Like, I can't remember which of them runs it, but the Morning Star I see sold in newspaper shops, not in huge quantities, but I can't remember which of the communist parties in the UK run that. There are like
it could be any of them. It could be
any of them.
Absolutely any of them. Apparently, let's have a look. See who owns it now.
Watch as it is it. Watch it. I can't even speak English. Watch as it is another fucking SWP front. Like,
no, it's. So apparently, it was transferred from the Communist Party of Great Britain to a readers' cooperative.
Oh.
In 1945. It still describes itself, as far as I'm aware. It's the one... Have you seen their logo? It's like the hammer and sickle, but the sickle is a big dove.
Oh, I believe it's one of the one of the cooler ones. And I say that with like a pinch of salt, because the communist parties in the UK are interesting. This is no shade on them, but there's some interesting intermingling.
I'd like to throw some shade on them, especially if the Morning Star's editorial stance is indicative of theirs. Is they have a problem with trans people, and that doesn't sit right with me for some reason.
Oh, is the Morning Star transphobic?
Yeah, there was a
Oh,
cartoon,
grim.
a cartoon not too long ago that was like the watershed moment for like, no, this is just transphobic, and you're not stopping this. Where it
Outstanding.
was, I think it was like an editorial cartoon of like a bunch of newts, and then there was an alligator getting into the little pond with them, being like, "Don't, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, don't
that
worry,
classic.
I'm a newt too."
Oh,
Um, and yeah, I'm sure there are members of the Communist Party of Great Britain and indeed the Morning Star team who are not transphobic. Unfortunately, they are carrying water for people who are.
yeah.
Um,
All right, fuck him.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Because like I know that the very transphobic Communist Party is CPGB ML, and they're all Marxist Leninist, but that one that calls itself Communist Party of Great Britain dash Marxist Leninist is the turf one. It's like they are unapologetically so. They're the anti. The only thing that matters is class. There is nothing else. Party.
wonderful.
And of
We
course
love
they're going
class
to run into some.
reductionists.
Yeah. And of course they're going to run into some issues with trans people as well as LGBT people and probably black people as well.
Yeah, I
Not saying that
mean,
they
yeah,
actively hate black people, but they'll probably downplay their experience.
yeah. Like I'm sure there was something else with the Communist Party of Britain that I'm not remembering. That's just one that sticks in my head for obvious reasons.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay, so fuck the Morning Star.
yeah, basically, like,
Cool.
and that's sort of the problem is that
Yeah.
like the Morning Star isn't even remotely comparable
No, not at all.
to
It's
like
just it's one that I
mainstream
see
media.
on the shelves next to the mainstream ones.
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah,
so yeah, back to where we were then.
yeah. So it just confuses me that like trade unions don't have a established media wing anymore. Like they
Because
don't.
I mean,
Go on.
I was gonna say, didn't CWU have like a news channel at one point?
I mean, I know their Twitter handle is at CWU News,
I swear they actually.
and
I don't
I'm
know.
pretty sure they had or have like a news thing.
You'd think that that's the one that would do it, right?
Well, yeah, that's where all the media nerds are represented. Yeah, but like, I don't know why there's no like trade union funded newspaper. Like, I don't know why there's no trade union sponsorships of fucking Twitch streamers. Like,
I'd do that. I'd do that. I pretty much already do that.
like I mean, I suppose that's actually part of it. Is like there's the expectation that people will do it for the cause, but like the thing is, people will still do it for the cause, even if you have like, people who you pay to be sure that they're getting your perspective out there. Like Rupert Murdoch is losing money on a number of his newspapers and media organizations, but like
That's a net win for him anyway, because
yeah,
like the less the working class are organized, the more money he can make off demonizing them and generally making things worse.
yeah, and like
Um,
there's all these efforts to create like a left media organization. There's like Novara Media for all of their faults, and like Red Pepper magazine, and like New Socialist and stuff like that. People who do generally do really good work, and like Owen Jones, who you don't always have to agree with Owen Jones, but he's the closest thing we have to mainstream
for sure.
left
Yeah.
wing representation. And every time his name trends on Twitter, it's because someone's angry at him for saying the most milquetoast
Oh yeah, for sure.
possible left wing idea. Like
That or because he's gay. And they normally a lot of people go in for that for some reason.
yeah, they do love to do that.
I say for some reason. I'm being sarcastic. I know exactly why they're going in for him for that.
Yeah, but like Yeah, he'll say, I don't think we should turn poor people into gruel to feed the dogs of the wealthy. And
Owen Jones wants to starve the dogs of the wealthy.
yeah, exactly. It's just such horrible bad faith nonsense. And, like, we've talked about it a little bit before, where people will get their ideas from the media they consume. The end of that Gramsci article, that Newspapers and the Workers, it actually ends with him saying if the workers were to be persuaded of this most elementary of truths, they would learn to boycott the bourgeois press with the same unity and discipline that the bourgeoisie boycott the newspapers of the workers. It basically just saying don't buy the media products of the people who are opposed to you.
The media products of the people. It's one of, like, a lot of people will be like, you gotta read the newspapers because you need to stay informed about what the bourgeois are doing to you, or what I mean. Like, that's no, because I need to think about this from a liberal perspective. You gotta read the news to stay informed, so you don't get swindled, you don't get got by, you got to be aware of your political candidates and stuff like this. You need to be aware, so buy our papers, please. And it's that forever.
Yeah, and like the media is one of, like, the largest tools in creating this cultural hegemony, creating and enforcing this cultural hegemony that the trade unions have no power against. Like, they like Noam Chomsky talks about, like, manufacturing consent and stuff, and in the UK there is no alternative for people but to engage with organizations that are trying to manufacture consent to do generally horrible things, like generally not good things. Like,
just in case I wasn't clear before as well, I didn't mean to say that reading news is bad. What I'm saying is that this media apparatus that is set up is designed to is not in the best interest of working class people. So don't ever get news ever, shove your fingers in your ears and hope for the best, but to understand that you should, like, there should be a working class perspective from these things, and not solely a bourgeois perspective. And the more you funnel money into that, the worse it gets, sort of thing. Fuck it, don't read anything. Live in a cave. Either or.
Yeah, we're gonna go, like, hard pivot to anarcho-primitivism.
We're on a podcast. Shit. We need to be communicating through doves.
Just carrier pigeons. Like, we're gonna develop an oral history of the trade union movement. I'm gonna I'm gonna walk into a room, announce what's going on, and then you all have to go and tell your friends. Like, that's.
And if you, yeah. I mean, like, here's. No, I'm not gonna say that because I'm gonna piss someone off by saying that.
I mean, I'll
say it, but I can edit it out.
I've already called the Morning Star, and by extension the Communist Party of Britain, transphobic. So I think, in terms of upsetting people, yeah, this is the episode. Apparently, this is the beef episode. We're just gonna start beefs.
I was just gonna say, like fucking every time I read the Bible, right? And this is not to be like Bible shit, because it has some interesting insights. But what I was gonna say is, like, the story of Jesus to me always reads one of a union organizer or just like a community organizer, who gets violently fucked up by the state. That is my interpretation, and that is going to piss some people off. But that's always been my interpretation of it.
Well, I mean, like, if you look at, like, the early history of the socialist movement in the Western world, Christian socialism was the driving force. Keir Hardie was a Christian socialist. Like, one of the reasons that, one of the many reasons that conservatives have such a bee in their bonnet about the Catholic Church is because in South America especially, there's a bunch of Catholic leaders who are leftists. They adhere to like liberation theology. Like Martin Luther King Jr. was a fucking minister, for God's sake. Like,
yeah.
That's not a wild interpretation of the story of Jesus of Nazareth at all, or even like the Bible. Like, I think there's a bunch of stuff around modern leftist theory and or modern Western leftist theory at the very least, and Christianity that you can't disentangle from one another. Like at some point, I want to get the horrible thoughts out of my head about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a podcast, we can do that.
Yeah, and like how the revolution is related to the rapture in like the ideas that people hold about them, and like that kind of thing. But this isn't the time for that.
Another time. How did we even get onto this? We started talking about anarcho-primitivists and lost it.
Yeah.
We just lost it completely. Oh, yeah, about the news and me saying that please don't interpret me as saying you should be uninformed all the time.
Yeah.
Just be aware that if you're reading or if you're engaging with bourgeois media, then you are being informed from a bourgeois perspective, and you should probably be seeking a proletarian perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and like obviously unions have tried to create that that media environment a little bit in the past. Like one of Howard Beckett like keystone pledges when he was running for Unite General Secretary was having Unite TV, just having a news station that delivered stuff from a trade union perspective. And I think it's a really good idea.
It's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, like I know it's not like Sharon Graham's MO. She's got a whole other focus, which is probably why she beat Howard Beckett, because she's much more focused on those actual disputes in work, as opposed to like the broader direction of like the union at like a national level, I suppose. She's more focused on like the actual workplace disputes, which is really cool and good, and again why she won. And I think she was right. Like she's right. Like those should be the major focus. I just think it's a shame that idea specifically ended up falling by the wayside, because Unite has loads of money. Unite has loads of capital to invest in these kinds of things, to begin creating that media environment where you're not just listening to bourgeois media again, because this did exist in the past. That's the thing. And anyway, the point is that unions don't have this strength, this cultural strength, to go against the will of the state, or they feel like they don't have that kind of strength, which means that they end up cancelling strikes when major events happen. It means that like one of like the older examples is when World War One kicked off. Like the trade unions were part of the machinery of state and worked to create the munitions and everything. Like that, like there were very few places across the Western world, where the unions did not engage in warfare prep,
which
when the state demanded it of them.
Exactly, and like just to make things clear, like warfare, pro-proletarian or anti-proletarian. Just to clear that up, workers shooting other workers is bad for workers. Just to make that explicitly clear. So yeah, I mean,
but like that's one of the more extreme examples, I think, of like the state leveraging its power and its hegemony over the workers and sort of disabusing them of their struggle for a period of time, whilst the state says, actually, it's not convenient for us right now. Can we check back in on this later?
It's always a bad time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is that it's always going to be a bad time. So by giving into this, it sort of does feel a little bit like it does feel a little bit like the unions are sort of playing themselves a little bit by going along with it at all, like by not developing that strength. But like
Speaking, oh, go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, in terms of like developing that strength, like that doesn't affect, like that theoretically doesn't affect like the reality of now. And I was gonna sort of say, it like is outright capitulation to the state and what it demands of you the right way to go about things like the current situation.
And all I was going to say was like that whole idea of like it's not the right time gives the state an incredibly powerful tool if you back down to it. I mean, they learn that
Yeah.
all they have to do to stop any workers' movements is to just say, "Oh, sorry, no, not the right time." And if the workers' movements disagree with that, the way that they can steer things back is, I mean, like conspiracy theory brain, but like manufacturing those like situations
Yeah.
where it would be a bad time.
Like the thing is that these events do happen. Like these events do happen. Like there are like things where the head of state will die. A war will kick off. It'll be a memorial for something. It'll be it'll be not the right time in just the right way that the unions feel like they have to back down at the moment because they don't have that power, and they will have to make this choice. Like especially the way unions are constructed now, like they'll have to choose whether or not to go along with it or to back down, whether they have the cultural capital to fight against it or fight through it. I don't think it's a democratic way of doing it necessarily, but like obviously we elect union leaders. Are they the right group of people to be making these calls? Should it be more direct democracy? I don't actually think that. Well, I don't actually think that it can be direct democracy in the way the unions are currently set up. Like, can you imagine if on the day the Queen died, CWU had like sent out an email to all their members being like, should the strike go ahead? Can you imagine like that happening? Like, can you imagine what would, like, how long can they keep that poll open? How long can they do that? They need to make a decision now. So like, you can't have like Dave Ward ringing up every single member of the CWU being like, do you think we should keep on going on strike?
What do you mean? And then he gets called a phone call tyrant.
Yeah, and then he gets told off for not respecting GDPR or something. But like, I think the solution to that is like having unions be less centralized in a number of ways and more member led. And like, I think that having these cells that would be able to make that decision for themselves, while still acting as an entity, is sort of the way to go and way to think about it. Because like the thing is, like, unions are going to be stronger in different workplaces. Like some workplaces a union will be really strong and will feel like, no, actually we can weather the bad news here and we want to carry on striking. And other places will say, well, actually we're going to go out of our way to show respect and deference at this time. And like decentralizing things like that, like obviously there's issues with it where where it sort of fragments the union almost in a way, but it's still workers acting as like a collective just on a more decentralized scale. And things like decentralizing the power would also act as like a leveling mechanism to stop people who shouldn't be given too much power and sway in the union being given that power and sway, which I think is only a good thing. And like unions are,
I wonder who you might be referring to there.
no idea. But like some unions are typically not representative of their members. Like I know for a fact, like PCS, the average civil servant is like a middle-aged woman, and that's not how the top union brass generally looks. I mean, we've got like Fran Heathcote, who is I think her last name's Heathcote, who's the president, but like the general secretary's been Mark Sawatka for like ages, like as long as I can remember. Decentralizing power in a lot of ways will make a union leadership less. It will make it less white. It will make it less straight. It will make it less male. Like, it might make it any sort of combination less of any one of those identities, but it will generally be more representative of the members in specific areas, and giving more power to decentralized groups probably helps with that.
I mean, it gives those groups the opportunity to be able to respond in a way that is appropriate for their regional area or their workplace, or the like major demographics within those areas. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm very happy with the structure of IWW, for example. Just to drop that in there. But so that's going to be it for this week. Stay tuned for a bonus episode this week. We do have a little bit more to talk about. So we've talked briefly about, how this cultural hegemony affects unions. We'll talk a little bit more as a bonus, shorter episode next week, with what they can do and how they can be useful around this sort of stuff.
Yeah, sort of like broader struggles. And like how trade unions can be useful in like other social movements, things like that, and then sort of how you can make a bit of an impact on the kind of things that need to develop to develop cultural hegemony.
Hell yeah. But with that, I think we'll draw this to a close. Thank you loads for listening to our cool voices for a bit. Thank you for allowing us to get all the bad stuff out, all that rot out of our heads and into your ears, to share it with the world. The music used in this episode was Solidarity Forever by Intellectual Darkwave. You can find them on Bandcamp and Instagram and YouTube, where I found them originally. We have socials, as always. You can find us on twitter.com under Unions in the UK. That's all one word. Or you can email us. Email's delicious. At unionsintheuk.co.uk. No! unionsintheuk.gmail.com. Did it. All one word.
Very good.
Fantastic. We will see you next time. Skibbity bee bop boo bop.